Daily Bible Time. Good morning. It is Dominic Steele. Thanks for joining us. It's Thursday morning, 21st of March, and we'll get back to Jeremiah tomorrow. But I've been reading this book this week, Australian Evangelical Perspectives on Youth Ministry, and Bill Saleer's chapter, Faithful Teaching About Sin in the Light of Child Development. And we talked to him about this on the Pastor's Heart on Tuesday. But I just wanted to draw on a couple of things that jumped out to me in Bill's book. He notes four things particularly that jumped out at me. First, sin can be spoken of in the singular and in the plural. The Apostle Paul, he says, prefers the singular form that can refer to sin as a state or a force, as in Romans 7, or even an orientation of the whole person. But he also refers to sin in the plural as the transgression of commandments. Therefore, there are many sins that are the manifestation of a state, force, orientation, or sins that are transgressions. When we're communicating the concept of sin, he notes this distinction is important. Secondly, a distinction is made between sins of commission and sins of omission. James chapter 4 verse 17, and also the two great commandments. It's conceivable that we have not loved the Lord our God with all our heart, mind and soul, nor our neighbours as ourselves. That might not be a specific transgression of the law, but rather a simple failure to love as we ought, to not do the good that might be right in front of us. He notes that we often focus on the sins of commission and miss the sins of omission in our preaching and practice. Thirdly, there are verses that hint at lighter and graver sins. Some verses suggest ignorance could mitigate the seriousness of sins, and that there are lesser and greater sins. Matthew 23:23 is one of those. And fourth, the biblical language implies that sin is a matter of the will, and it proceeds from the heart. It enslaves and works in concert with the world and the devil, and that sin against others is ultimately sin against God. In terms of teaching on sin, he stresses that we should teach the reality of sin and the responsibility that we all bear. Secondly, we should talk about sin as a responsible action, and we need to keep the relational dimension prominent, that sin is relational. Due to our lack of trust in God, we reject God's love, we fail to love our neighbour, we need to maintain a focus on sin against God as our primary category. Sin is a relational problem. And then he talks about, thirdly, we need to teach that sin is a power that controls us, emphasizing the need for rescue. And this is not to deny the necessity of personal responsibility, but we need to emphasize that we are indeed helpless, hapless, and therefore hopeless, and in need of a saviour. So sin can be understood as a bully who not only needs to be resisted, but against whom we need the ally of a big brother or sister to rescue us. He has a very interesting line, a very interesting quote from Bruno Bettelheim, saying there is a widespread refusal to let children know that the source of much that goes wrong in life is due to our very own natures and propensity of all men for acting aggressively, selfishly, out of anger and anxiety. Instead, we want our children to believe that inherently all men are good, but children know that they are not always good, and often, even when they are, they prefer not to be. This contradicts what they're told by their parents, and therefore makes the child a monster in his own eyes. And Bill noted that guy, Bruno Bettelheim, wasn't necessarily Christian, but a very interesting statement from him about what I intrinsically know about myself. Anyway, there's a couple of reflections from Bill Saleer in this little book, Australian Evangelical Perspectives on Youth Ministry, that I have been reading and benefiting from this week. Thanks for joining us on Daily Bible Time today. Back to Jeremiah tomorrow. God bless.